Knowing how the towers collapsed does not fully explain what specific components failed.
Pieces of the tree columns from the tower.
For that, the investigators needed to examine the remains of the buildings.
First numbers identify which building it's in.
Most steel components had locator numbers stamped on the surface.
Part of the column extended from floor 39 to 41.
If those numbers survive, investigators can actually pinpoint where each piece of steel came from, even in this surreal and mangled pile. Central to the investigation is finding the floor trusses and their connections.
This is the bottom piece of the truss connection.
These lightweight but critical supports have been prime suspects in the collapse. And many observers have been outspoken on this issue from the beginning.
With the bar.
Had the floor system been a more robust floor system with much stronger connections between the exterior and the inside, I think the buildings probably would have lasted longer. Would they ultimately have collapsed? Maybe not.
From the evidence found at the steel yards and from computer modeling of applied forces, the team now believes the truss connections probably did fail from the force of the impact, the heat of the fire, or both. But the study concludes that there was a more fundamental reason for the overall collapse.
We found that the types of fireproofing that were used were damaged by the aircraft hitting them. If the fire resistance of the building was increased so that the material in there could burn out before a collapse occurred, then you could come back in quickly afterwards, stabilize the building, and save it from collapse.
The team concluded that the fire-resistant foam was blown off with ease. If it had remained intact, the steel would have kept its resistance to the damaging effects of the heat. And since the contents would have eventually burned out on their own, had the steel been better protected, the Twin Towers might not have fallen.
We can, by the way, if we can cue the tape, we can show you that second attack, or at least the second explosion in the Trade Center that occurred at about 9:15 Eastern Time. As you can imagine, there you can see to the right of your screen a plane coming in. We do have a report of a hijacked American Airlines plane. It comes into the south side, and then boom, you can see the fire coming out the front, or the north side of the building. I guess that'd be the northeast side of the building. And then just in the last several minutes, there has been a second explosion, or at least perhaps not an explosion, perhaps part of the building simply collapsed. And that's what we saw, and that's what we're looking at as smoke now just covers lower Manhattan. What happened just a few moments ago at the Trade Center? Watch the building to the left, to the back of those two buildings. This is just a few minutes ago. We don't know if something happened, another explosion, or if the building was so weakened, it just collapsed. But
Two towers, the south tower of the World Trade Center has just crumbled, collapsed in a pile of dust. This approximately less than an hour after it was hit by an aircraft.
The second building completely down. Where are you? You heard the
A situation that started bad just gets worse and worse and worse. The World Trade Center, South Tower, which was hit by a plane and cracked by an explosion, approximately an hour ago, has totally collapsed.
can tell you is that just in the last several minutes here, 2 or 3 minutes, a second or third, I guess technically, extraordinary event has happened here in Lower Manhattan. You can see this extraordinary plume of smoke that is, or was at least, the second tower of the World Trade Center. Oh, perhaps 3 or 4 minutes ago, you could, from where we were standing, see that second building that is just a bit to the south of the first building, but you can't see it anymore. It is covered with smoke. A large plume of smoke also coming still from the first tower, where the first plane hit at about 8:45.
Rescue services continue their search through the rubble. Their engineers have been trying to explain why the twin towers of the Trade Center collapsed so quickly.
World Trade Towers rose 1,362 feet into the sky. Visit those same towers today. At their tallest point, they rise maybe 100 feet above the street. And while it's true there are 6 floors below street level, now filled with debris, engineers at the firm that built the building's best guess to account for the missing 1,200 feet of material from each tower is that large portions simply vaporized into the dust that rained down on New Yorkers immediately after the collapse.
In the aftermath of the collapse of the South Tower, dazed firefighters were trying to regroup and get to grips with the catastrophe they faced. All they could hear were the calls for help and the high-pitched personal alarms of injured firefighters going off all around them. Inside the stricken North Tower, Captain Jonas knew it was a race against time.
I knew what kind of danger we were in. The time wasn't on our side anymore, that we were going to be lucky if we got out of here alive. So I looked at my guys and I said, all right, guys, if that one can go, this one can go. It's time for us to get out of here.
In 2002, NOVA depicted a scenario envisioned by many experts at the time, that the truss connections failed in the extreme heat, causing the floors to fall onto one another, precipitating the collapse.
When you did it previously, you showed that the floors actually pancaked. And we did not see any evidence of pancaking in the videos or photographs we have.
And I know on occasion we can run the images of it to the point of offensiveness. I hope we're not there, but this is what it looked like when one of the trade towers just appeared to either peel away or collapse on itself, but from top to bottom, 110 stories. To the bottom, first one, the second tower. Operation Lattice 6, all units stand by. Operation Lattice 6. Sometime later,
I got a radio transmission from Nick Visconti. I heard Operations Post to Lattice 6. Operations Post to Lattice 6. This is Jay, where are you?
Okay, 10-4. North Tower, stairwell B is in boy on the second floor.
These firemen from Brooklyn have been taking the mountain down piece by piece, and many of them share the pessimism of the doctors. It's what?
It's just huge rubble.
Do you see anything of the victims, of the people who were in the building?
You've got 110 stories on top of everybody over there. It's just tough to say.
110 stories on top of everybody.
That's what the two buildings were.
Everybody's working together, you know, the whole city, trying to get people out.
How do you dig this up?
Piece by piece.
Hand by hand. That's why you just make the chains and get the debris out. So that's all you can do.
110 stories at ground level.
110 stories at ground level.
If you get a shot, you'll see the antenna that was on top of the tower. It's at ground level.
And yet there are no people to be seen.
We got a couple of Port Authority cops alive.
Right? Last night?
Last night, this morning. I suppose they were like on the 80th floor from what we heard. But that's it so far.
It was midday on 9/11, and Captain Jay Jonas's Mayday messages were still not being picked up. The firefighters had no idea there was a pocket of survivors nearby. Then Jay again tried to make radio contact. Unexpectedly, this time his call was picked up. Remarkably, none of the survivors were seriously injured. They were all given first aid as soon as they came out.
History of successful steel construction in this country and in fact the world. And one of the great successes is that under normal fire conditions, we don't have building collapse. In fact, until 9/11, I was unaware of any protected steel structure that had collapsed anywhere in the world from just a fire.
It was the combination of the impact load doing great damage to the building, followed by the fire that caused collapse.
Some aspects of the disaster go on. Take a look at this picture just a short time ago. Another of the buildings damaged in the attack on the World Trade Center in downtown Manhattan finally surrendered in a kind of slow motion collapse. The building apparently was damaged by the collapse of the nearby Twin Towers.
The way the building fell supports the idea that at least one of the trusses was weakened by the fires in the building and gave way.
I see. Look at that. What do you see?
I see something that's unimaginable. I see what is a police commissioner's worst nightmare. This is a situation that obviously was well planned, well coordinated, and the loss of life that's taking place down there is just incredible, and is going to strain the emergency services of this city to the hilt.
Are you hearing any specific information? Are you hearing anything about the number of injuries, the number of fatalities, the number of people in that building, those buildings? Are you getting any of that information from?
Well, I know there are 50,000 people who work in the World Trade Center. I know that every ambulance and every fire company in the city has been called in and dispatched there. It's unimaginable, but the loss of life is going to be huge.
The search for remains continued. Investigators were looking for evidence that might lead to the identification of a victim. A broken watch, a fragment of a credit card, a human body part, such as a hand, that could be fingerprinted. A few victims might be identified by traditional methods, such as jewelry, tattoos, and dental records. Most would require a DNA match. At the Bodie Technology Group in Virginia, thousands of vials, each representing an extinguished human life, began to arrive. One by one, they were logged into the computer tracking system. They were shipped to Virginia because the New York Medical Examiner's Office, the city agency responsible for victim identification, could not handle the volume of work generated by the World Trade Center attack.
When you can put the remains together and be able to say to a family, here are your remains, and they can actually bury those remains of their loved ones, it does bring very good closure to them. I think that's ultimately the reward that all of us have for putting in the extra effort to make this happen.
We need to look for types of fireproofing that can take the impact and can stand up to the impact and stick to the steel after the impact.
The report also points to failure of the drywall construction to protect the emergency exits in the core.
The core in concrete might have actually stood for a much longer period of time, allowing many, many more occupants to leave the building. It would certainly have allowed the occupants on the upper floors to have a safe passage through at least one of the vertical stairwells. The core in concrete might have actually stood through the fire and survived.
nations. The honor. It's the will to fight. And determination to win. Found inside each and every man. Answers, nations call. It's the will to fight. And determination to win. Found inside each and every man. That answers a nation's call.
Where he was attending an Organization of American States meeting. He said this before he cut short his trip to return to Washington.
A terrible, terrible tragedy has befallen my nation, but has befallen all the nations of this region, all the nations of the world, befallen all those who believe in democracy. Once again, we see terrorism, we see terrorists, people who don't believe in democracy, people who believe that with the destruction of buildings, with the murder of people, they can somehow achieve a political purpose. They can destroy buildings, they can kill people, and we will be saddened by this tragedy, but they will never be allowed to kill the spirit of democracy.
The United States of America will not permit the world's most dangerous regimes to threaten us with the world's most destructive weapons. The United States of America will not permit the world's most dangerous regimes to threaten us with the world's most destructive weapons. The United States of America will not permit the world's most dangerous regimes will not threaten us with the world's most destructive weapons. Threaten us. The United States of most destructive weapons. Dangerous regimes destructive. Threaten us with the world's most destructive weapons. The United States of America will not permit the world's most dangerous regimes. The United States of America with the world's most destructive weapons. Dangerous regimes threaten us with the world's most destructive weapons.